Come join me on my second channel, Jaguar Gator 8, where we'll talk all things college football. New video drops every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Click the card in the upper right corner to watch the latest video. And now, on with our feature presentation. There's nothing quite like a homecoming game. There's nothing quite like a game where you get to come back to the city that you grew up in and spent your childhood in, and where you get to play in front of your friends and your family. All the years of playing on the local fields around the stadium, hoping one day you get to play in the big stadium and play professionally, and now that moment's finally here, where you get to come back to your hometown as a fully fledged professional football player. And there have been tons of great homecoming games throughout the history of the NFL. Arizona Cardinals wide receiver Larry Fitzgerald, who was born in Minneapolis, playing at the Metrodome in 2006 and going for 11 receptions and 172 yards. Buffalo Bills wide receiver Bill Brooks, who was born in Boston and went to school in Boston, coming back in 1994 to play for the New England Patriots, and in a 38-35 victory, recording 7 receptions for 91 yards and a touchdown. Baltimore Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson, who grew up 30 minutes outside of Miami, coming down to South Beach on opening day of the 2019 season and posting a perfect passer rating while throwing 5 touchdowns and 3 incompletions in a 59-10 victory. Tennessee Titans running back Derrick Henry, who grew up right outside Jacksonville, well, take your pick on whichever game you want to use, because there's about 10,000 of them. I could go on and on about all these great homecoming games where a player balls out in front of his friends and family and shows his hometown just how much he grew up and just how good he truly is. This is not one of those games. This was a complete disaster. This is Dallas Cowboys running back Troy Hambrick, and he was born in Lacoochee, Florida, roughly half an hour outside of Tampa Bay. In 2003, when his Dallas Cowboys were set to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Hambrick was thrilled and had tons of people in his camp who were able to see him play live and in person for the first time at the NFL level. The end result was a game where everything that could have gone wrong did. He was awful, the team was awful, and he only made things worse in the post-game press conference with some absolutely idiotic comments. This is the story behind, quite possibly, the worst homecoming game in NFL history. Before I talk about the game in question, we need some context to understand who the player was, how he was playing going into the game, and most importantly, why this game was so important to him. Because unfortunately, the story behind his relationship with his hometown is somewhat tragic, and there's no easy way to talk about it, especially in the context of the game. However, our story involves this man right here, Troy Hambrick, the former South Carolina and Savannah State running back. Even though he went undrafted during the 2000 NFL Draft, he signed on with the Dallas Cowboys and spent his first 3 seasons backing up legendary running back Emmitt Smith, along with playing some fullback from time to time. Now, Hambrick was not exactly pleased with Smith. He thought that Smith was washed at this point and that he should be getting reps over Smith. I'm not going to dive too much into the weeds of that, but let's just say that Hambrick was very vocal about his desire to play. As a side note, if you want to learn more about how the Cowboys got Emmitt Smith in the first place, and the crazy process that went into drafting the eventual Hall of Fame running back, click the card in the upper right corner. Finally, in 2003, after Smith was off of the Cowboys, Hambrick got his chance to start. And over the first 6 games, by no means was Hambrick great. He averaged just 3.3 yards per carry and had 3 games with less than 3 yards per carry. However, considering his style, he was perfectly fine. Hambrick was a bulldozer who rarely went down on first contact. While he wasn't going to kill you with his speed, he was going to kill you with his strength. And if you let him build up speed and get into the second level, good luck trying to stop him one-on-one. In that regard, as we saw in Week 4 against the New York Jets, where he had 127 yards and a touchdown and over 5 yards per carry in a 17-6 victory, he was really solid. And even despite the relatively low yards per carry average, he had scored a rushing touchdown in each of his last 2 games, and was on pace over the course of the 16-game season for over 1,100 rushing yards, which is not too shabby by any means. And through all of this, the Dallas Cowboys were the surprise team in the NFL. After some miserable seasons at the start of the millennium, thanks to Dave Campo being an absolutely atrocious coach, the Cowboys hired Bill Parcells, who immediately turned around the team. The Cowboys went 5-11 in each of the last 3 seasons. By the time they played their 6th game in 2003, they already matched their total, and were 5-1, leading the NFC East by 2 games and boasting the 2nd best defense in the conference. The only team better than them in that category? That was their next opponent, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the defending Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Not only was this a big game for the Cowboys as they looked to extend their winning streak to 6 games and grow their lead on the rest of the NFC East, but this was maybe the biggest game of Troy Hambrick's career, because this was a chance to come back home and show the people what he could do. Troy Hambrick was born in Lacoochee. It's a small town that's 2.8 square miles with a population of less than 1,500 people. and it's a relatively poor area, with more than 51% of the population living below the poverty line. Hambrick made it out and made it into the NFL. And for his friends and family still residing in the area, this was their first real opportunity since he was playing high school football back in 1995 for them to see him play. This game was so big for Hambrick that he bought 50 tickets inside Raymond James Stadium for the town to watch him play, which he joked was about half of the population of Lacoochee. But this game on October 26, 2003 was a big homecoming game not just because this was the first time he was coming back home, but because he suffered an absolutely tumultuous summer that might have been the most difficult time of his life. On June 1st, roughly 5 months before the game, Hambrick got a call from his mother. His mom called to inform him that Lieutenant Charles Harrison was shot and killed in his patrol car. Harrison was the first football coach that Hambrick ever had, with Harrison coaching Hambrick and Pop Warner, so this hit hard for him. As he said, "This is the guy who taught my brother and I everything we knew about football, a guy we respected. He gave us money when we needed it. He took care of us." Harrison drove Hambrick to practice because Hambrick's mom didn't have a car, and Hambrick even lived with Harrison at some points. It was partially because of this incident that Hambrick dedicated his life later that offseason to Christ and joined the First Baptist Church of Hamilton Park down in Texas. And to make matters worse about the whole incident, the man who killed Harrison was a longtime family friend of Hambrick's, 19-year-old Alfredi Steele. And to make matters even worse, many people accused Hambrick's brother, former NFL player Darren Hambrick, of being the one to kill Harrison, which was not true. And this made Troy furious, because on top of having to grieve the loss of a father figure, he had to deal with the nonsense rumors that his brother was the one who did it. As Hambrick said, "To think he had anything to do with that, what the hell is that? To think my brother had any affiliation with that is wrong. It hurts me." Combine that with the recent death of Hambrick's grandfather-in-law, who also lived in Lacoochee, and this game was incredibly important for Hambrick to be able to return to his hometown and give his friends and family something to cheer about after the roughest summer of his life and after a couple of months that rocked the town. And unfortunately, that did not happen. In general, this game was absolutely ugly. Nothing went right for the Cowboys offensively on this day. The defense did its best. Tampa was held to 14 first downs and roughly 3.5 yards per carry. Yes, the Buccaneers scored a touchdown in the second quarter on a 7-yard touchdown pass from Brad Johnson to Keyshawn Johnson, but that was the only time the Bucs found their way into the end zone all day, with the bulk of their points coming off of great field position given to them by an inept Cowboys offense. The Cowboys on this day could not move the ball whatsoever. They picked up just 9 first downs. They turned it over 3 times. They converted just 25% of their third downs. They had just 178 yards all game. Quarterback Quincy Carter went 15 for 25 with 140 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 4 sacks, and a passer rating of 42.1, and finished the game with a mere 118 net yards passing. The 11 drives that the Cowboys had resulted in 6 punts, 2 interceptions, a fumble, a turnover on downs, and a missed field goal. And when the final whistle sounded, the Buccaneers prevailed, winning at 16-0, giving the Cowboys their first shutout loss since Christmas Day in 2000, when they lost 31-0 to the Tennessee Titans in their regular season finale. But you can still have a great individual performance and a great homecoming game in a losing effort. Heck, I talked earlier about Larry Fitzgerald's return to Minneapolis and how well he played in that game, and the Cardinals still lost. So did Troy Hambrick have a good game? Nope. Not at all. In fact, it might have been the worst game of his career. In the first quarter, he had 1 run that went for 15 yards. On his other 10 runs, he picked up 10 yards. I'm not a math major, but I'm going to take a wild stab at it without a calculator and say that 10 yards on 10 runs equals 1 yard per carry. If we bring that long run of his back into the equation, Hambrick had 11 carries for 25 yards to finish the game, averaging less than 2.3 yards per carry, including 3 runs that went for negative yards and 2 third-and-ones that he did not convert. Hambrick was so ineffective that he didn't record a single rushing attempt in the second half, and the only time he laid a finger on the ball during the second half was when he dropped the pass. To put into perspective just how bad this game was for Hambrick and his return, I looked at every game that Hambrick had this season at the time. His 11 rushing attempts were a season low, his 25 rushing yards were a season low, and his 2.27 yards per carry was a season low. In each of the 3 major statistical rushing categories, he put up the worst numbers of the season. Additionally, I looked at every game that Hambrick had in his career up until that point where he had at least 10 rushing attempts, of which there were 12 of them. This was quite easily his lowest rushing output ever in an expanded role. Not only was this homecoming game a shutout loss, but it was the worst game of his career. And if you think that's the end of the story, don't worry, it's about to get worse. because Hambrick is about to do something incredibly stupid in the post-game press conference that takes this homecoming game from really bad to legendarily bad to the point where we're still talking about it 2 decades later. If you're a longtime viewer on my channel, you know my #1 rule of trash talk is that you better be able to back it up, because otherwise, you're going to look like an idiot. But perhaps the stupidest thing any player can do is trash talk a team and trash talk the defending Super Bowl champion after a shutout loss. It's not the first time I've done a video on a team being dumb enough to do this, as the San Francisco 49ers did this after their 1980 regular season finale loss to the Buffalo Bills, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. But this might be a million times worse when you consider who the opponent was, and the fact that at least the Niners kept it close against Buffalo and had the game come down to the final play. This was a shutout loss where he had the worst game of his career. But in Hambrick's eyes, the Buccaneers defense, the same defense that shut the Cowboys out to snap their 5-game winning streak, had the #1 defense in the NFC from a points allowed standpoint, and had one of the greatest seasons of all time the year before when they won their first Super Bowl in franchise history at Super Bowl 37? Yeah, they're not very good. As Hambrick said on the Buccaneers, they're frontrunners. I didn't hear nothing from Warren Sapp until they got a nice lead. I've seen better pass rushes. He then took control of the press conference and went around the room, asking reporters one by one if they thought the Buccaneers had a great defense. After asking the question multiple times, he said, "I think we made enough mistakes to make them look good. None of their inside guys made tackles. It was safeties coming in off the corners, and they weren't accounted for." So not only was Hambrick criticizing the Bucs for not being good, despite the Bucs shutting the Cowboys out and holding Hambrick to his worst performance of his career, but he was criticizing the coaching staff as well. That seems like a great strategy. Imagine a pitcher allowing a player to hit 3 home runs off of him, and the pitcher says after the game, "Do you think he's a good hitter? He's not that good. I just made a few bad pitches. You look like a moron." And sure enough, many people thought after the game that Troy Hambrick looked like a moron. One of those guys who helped clog up the middle and prevent Hambrick and the Cowboys from going anywhere all day was eventual Hall of Fame defensive tackle Warren Sapp, who basically laughed in Hambrick's face. Sapp went to town on Hambrick, saying Troy Hambrick was on the bench behind the greatest running back in the history of the NFL, and he was talking trash, so you expect the man to run off at the mouth. I mean, come on. I don't remember him making a play, except the one where we blitzed and he got 1 play. Okay, Troy, take that one home with your 50 tickets. Sapp then added, Troy Hambrick ran Emmitt Smith out of Dallas. He don't know talent if it was poured on him. How many yards did Troy Hambrick have today? Ooh, Troy, you're a quarter of the way to 100. Awesome, baby. Awesome. So not only did Hambrick get shut out in front of his friends and family, but he then proceeded to make himself look like a fool. And unfortunately for Hambrick, this game was a sign of things to come for how the rest of his career would go. Hambrick did not last too much longer in the NFL after this game. For whatever reason, he was dominant against Washington, as in the 2 games that he played against them, he had 100 yards and 189 yards, with the Cowboys winning both of those games. In those 2 games, he had 289 yards rushing. In the other 7 games that season, he had just 239 rushing yards on just 2.8 yards per carry. His play took a sharp nosedive outside of the random games against their division rival. And it was very clear by the end of the season, especially after a 29-10 loss in the wildcard round against the Carolina Panthers, where he got the start and finished the game with just 29 rushing yards, that Hambrick could not be an every down back, and was not the successor to Emmitt Smith. In an amazing bit of irony, Hambrick found himself in 2004 on the Arizona Cardinals, where he played alongside, you guessed it, Emmitt Smith. And in Arizona, he did next to nothing. He picked up just 283 yards rushing that season and 1 rushing touchdown, with those totals being the lowest of his career excluding his rookie season in 2000. And he spent the final 6 weeks of the year on injured reserve. Hambrick never played another down in the NFL after that 2004 season, meaning that the game he had in 2003 against the Buccaneers was the first and only time ever that he played in his hometown and got to play in front of his friends and family. From now on, if he was going to buy 50 tickets to a Buccaneers game, it was going to be to watch other people on the field. When you consider the circumstances strictly from an on-the-field perspective, everything about this game was awful. You had a shutout loss. You had the worst performance of the season and of his career in just about every major statistical rushing category. You had an embarrassing post-game press conference that left everyone scratching their heads and thinking to themselves that he was an idiot. You had a Hall of Fame defensive tackle and one of the greatest to ever do it completely trash him and talk about how he wasn't talented. And you had a game that wound up being the turning point in his career in the worst way possible, with everything after this minus some games against Washington being a train wreck. Bon Jovi once famously asked the question, who says he can't go home? I think after this embarrassment, we know that Troy Hambrick was the one who was saying that. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at Jaguar Gator 9. To see college football videos, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.